Lieutenant Commander Marcus Reaper Cross had seen a lot in his 15 years as a Navy SEAL. He had fought in deserts where the sand could blind you in seconds. He had swum through freezing waters that would kill most men. He had jumped from planes so high up that the earth looked like a marble. But nothing had prepared him for waking up in what looked like a metal box floating in space. The last thing Marcus remembered was leading his team through a routine reconnaissance mission in the mountains of Afghanistan. They were tracking a high-value target when the sky suddenly turned bright white. The next second, everything went black. Now he was here, wherever here was, with walls that seemed to glow with their own light and air that tasted different from anything he had ever breathed. Marcus sat up slowly, his head pounding like someone had hit him with a sledgehammer. His tactical gear was gone. Instead, he wore some kind of gray jumpsuit that felt softer than silk, but stronger than Kevlar. Around his wrists were metal bands that hummed with energy. When he tried to pull them apart, they wouldn't budge. These weren't ordinary handcuffs. The room was small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, with no windows and only one door that had no handle or visible way to open it. The walls curved slightly, like he was inside a giant egg. Everything was smooth and clean, almost too clean. It reminded him of a hospital, but hospitals didn't float in space. Marcus stood up and tested his body. Everything seemed to work fine. No broken bones, no cuts, no pain except for the headache. His training kicked in immediately. First rule of being captured: gather information. He examined every inch of his prison cell, looking for weaknesses, cameras, anything that might help him understand where he was and who had taken him. As he ran his hands along the walls, he noticed they were warm to the touch. The metal felt alive somehow, like it was watching him. When he pressed harder against one section, the wall actually gave way slightly, like it was made of some kind of smart material that could change its properties. That's when he heard the footsteps. They were different from human footsteps, too light, too quick, and they made a clicking sound like claws on metal. Marcus moved to the center of the room and took a fighting stance even though his hands were bound. A SEAL never gave up, no matter what the odds. The door slid open without a sound, revealing creatures that made Marcus question everything he thought he knew about the universe. They stood about 7 feet tall, with bodies that looked like they were carved from black stone. Their skin had a texture like scales, but it shimmered with colors that changed as they moved. They had 4 arms instead of 2, and each hand ended in claws that could probably cut through steel. But it was their faces that really got to him. They looked almost human, but wrong in every way that mattered. Their eyes were too large, colored like liquid silver, and they never seemed to blink. Their mouths were filled with teeth that were definitely not meant for eating plants. When they spoke, their voices sounded like grinding metal mixed with whispers. "Human," said the first creature, pointing at Marcus with one of its 4 hands. "You are now property of the Cathara Empire. You will work in the mines until you die. Resistance is futile. Many of your species have learned this truth." Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. Other humans. That meant these things had been capturing people from Earth for who knows how long. But he kept his face calm, showing no emotion. Another rule from SEAL training: never let the enemy know what you're thinking. "I want to speak to whoever is in charge," Marcus said, his voice steady and strong. He had negotiated with terrorists, drug lords, and warlords. These things might look different, but they were still just another enemy to defeat. The creatures looked at each other and made sounds that might have been laughter, but it sounded more like breaking glass. "The human thinks it has rights," said the second creature. "The human thinks it matters. Soon you will learn. The mines will teach you your place." They gestured for him to move toward the door. Marcus considered fighting, but with his hands bound and no weapons, it would be suicide. Better to gather more information and wait for a better opportunity. He had escaped from impossible situations before. This would just be one more story to tell when he got home. The corridor outside his cell was long and curved, with the same glowing walls as his prison. As they walked, Marcus counted steps, memorized turns, and studied everything around him. The ship, because that's obviously what this was, seemed huge. They passed dozens of doors like his, and he could hear sounds from behind some of them. Crying, shouting, the occasional scream, other prisoners, other humans who had been taken from Earth. After 10 minutes of walking, they reached a larger area that looked like some kind of central hub. Here, Marcus got his first real look at the scope of what he was dealing with. The space was enormous, with multiple levels connected by ramps and what looked like floating platforms. Hundreds of the alien creatures moved around, going about their business like this was just another day at the office. But it was the other humans that made Marcus's blood boil. They were everywhere, wearing the same gray jumpsuits, all with the metal bands around their wrists. They moved like zombies, their heads down, their spirits clearly broken. Some were young, maybe teenagers. Others were old enough to be grandparents. Men, women, children. These monsters had taken them all. "How long have you been taking people from Earth?" Marcus asked as they walked. One of his guards made that glass-breaking laugh sound again. "Your world is nothing special, human. We harvest from thousands of worlds. Your species is useful for mining because you are small and can fit into tight spaces. Also, you breed quickly to replace those who die." Marcus filed that information away. These weren't just raiders or slavers. They were running an industrial operation, treating humans like livestock. The rage building inside him was cold and calculating. He had spent his entire adult life protecting innocent people from monsters like these. The fact that they were aliens didn't change anything. They entered what looked like a processing center. Here, newly captured humans were being sorted like cattle. Some were sent to one line, others to different lines based on criteria Marcus couldn't figure out. The aliens doing the sorting moved with efficient, practiced motions. They had obviously been doing this for a long time. "You will be evaluated," one of his guards told him. "Your physical capabilities will be measured. Your intelligence will be tested. Then you will be assigned to appropriate labor." Marcus was pushed toward a machine that looked like a cross between an MRI scanner and a torture device. Other humans were lined up in front of him, each one looking more defeated than the last. When it was their turn, they lay down on the table without resistance and let the machine do whatever it was designed to do. As he waited in line, Marcus studied the guards, the machines, the layout of the room. He noticed that the aliens seemed to have a hierarchy based on the color of their scales. The darker ones gave orders to the lighter ones. He also noticed that they wore no visible weapons. Either they were incredibly confident in their security, or they had weapons that weren't obvious to human eyes. The human in front of him was a woman, maybe in her 40s, with the haunted look of someone who had given up hope. As she lay down on the scanning table, Marcus leaned closer to her. "How long have you been here?" he whispered. She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "Time doesn't mean anything here. Could be months, could be years. I was taken from my car in Denver. One minute I was driving home from work, the next minute I woke up in a cell just like you. How many of us are there? Thousands on this ship alone. They say there are dozens of ships like this one, all collecting workers for the mines. The mines are on dead worlds where nothing can live except in artificial environments. The work kills most people within a few years." Before Marcus could ask more questions, the aliens pushed the woman onto the table. The machine hummed to life, surrounding her with beams of light that seemed to look right through her body. Numbers and symbols appeared on screens that the aliens could read, but meant nothing to Marcus. After a few minutes, the woman was pulled off the table and pushed toward one of the exit corridors. "Next!" growled one of the guards, pointing at Marcus. Marcus lay down on the table, his mind racing. Whatever this machine did, It was probably measuring his physical fitness. As a Navy SEAL, he was in better shape than 99.9% of the human population. That might be good, or it might be very bad, depending on what kind of work they had planned for him. The scanning beams felt warm against his skin, and he could sense them probing every muscle, every bone, every organ in his body. The aliens watching the screens began making excited clicking sounds. One of them pressed buttons that caused new displays to appear. More clicking, more excitement. When the scanning was finished, Marcus was pulled off the table. But instead of being pushed toward one of the regular exit corridors, he was taken to a different door, one that required 2 guards to open with some kind of key card. "Special assignment," said one of the guards. "Your physical parameters are unusual. You will not go to the mines." That could be good news or very bad news. Marcus decided to probe for more information. "What kind of special assignment?" "The arena." The way the alien said that word, with a mixture of anticipation and something that might have been respect, made Marcus's blood run cold. He had heard stories from other special operations soldiers about underground fighting rings in various countries, but something told him that whatever the arena was, it would make those look like children's games. They walked through parts of the ship that were clearly different from the prisoner areas. Here, the walls were decorated with what looked like artwork, if artwork could be made from materials that hurt to look at directly. The aliens they passed wore more elaborate clothing and jewelry, indicating higher status. Eventually, they reached a set of massive doors that were obviously designed to impress. They were at least 20 feet tall and covered with carvings that seemed to move when Marcus wasn't looking directly at them. When the doors opened, the sound echoed like thunder. The room beyond was enormous, bigger than any stadium Marcus had ever seen. The center was a circular pit surrounded by rising rows of seats that could probably hold thousands of spectators. The pit itself was maybe 100 feet across, with walls that were too high and smooth for anyone to climb out of. But it wasn't empty. As Marcus watched, a section of the floor opened up and a platform rose from below. On the platform were 2 figures. One was human, a man who looked like he might have been a soldier or maybe a construction worker before being captured. He was big and muscled, but his eyes had that same defeated look Marcus had seen in all the other prisoners. The other figure was something that made the Cathara aliens look friendly by comparison. It stood on 4 legs like a massive wolf, but its body was covered in armor that looked like it had grown rather than been manufactured. Its head was long and narrow, filled with teeth that dripped with something that steamed when it hit the ground. When it moved, Marcus could see muscles rippling under the armor like cables under tension. The human held a weapon that looked like a sword, crossed with a chainsaw. The creature had claws that were easily a foot long and looked sharp enough to cut through diamond. It was obvious who was expected to win this fight. "Welcome to the arena," said a new voice behind Marcus. He turned to see a Cathara that was clearly important. Its scales were so dark they were almost black, and it wore elaborate jewelry that seemed to pulse with its own light. "I am Commander Vextar. You will be our newest gladiator." Marcus looked back at the pit where the fight was about to begin. The human was trying to be brave, but Marcus could see the fear in his eyes. The creature was just waiting, like a cat playing with a mouse before the kill. "I don't fight for entertainment," Marcus said. Vexatar made that glass-breaking laugh sound. "You will fight, or you will die. Those are your only choices. But perhaps you would like to know why you are here, in the arena instead of the mines." The fight in the pit began with a roar from the creature. The human swung his weapon, but the beast was too fast. Within seconds, it was over. The human's scream cut off abruptly, and the crowd of aliens in the stands cheered with sounds like breaking machinery. "Your species is weak," Vextar continued as if nothing had happened. "But occasionally, we find specimens with unusual physical capabilities. These we test in the arena. If they survive long enough to provide entertainment, they live in better conditions than the mine workers. If they die quickly, they die quickly. Marcus forced himself to watch as the creature in the pit began feeding on what remained of the human. He had seen death before, had dealt it himself when necessary, but this was something else. This was murder for sport, and it made him angrier than he had ever been in his life. "The testing will begin tomorrow," Vextar said. "You will be provided with weapons and training. Try not to disappoint us. We have invested considerable resources in bringing you here." As they led him away from the arena, Marcus began planning. He had been in impossible situations before, but nothing quite like this. He was alone, on an alien ship, surrounded by creatures that saw humans as entertainment or slave labor. He had no weapons, no communication with Earth, no idea where he was in the universe. But he had one thing that these aliens didn't understand. He was a Navy SEAL. He had been trained since the age of 18 to never give up, never surrender, and never leave a fellow soldier behind. There were thousands of humans on this ship who were counting on someone to save them, even if they didn't know it yet. The aliens had made one crucial mistake. They thought that by putting him in the arena, they were using him for their entertainment. What they didn't realize was that they had just given a highly trained special operations soldier access to weapons and combat training areas. They had also given him a way to get the attention of their leadership. As they locked him in a new cell, larger and more comfortable than the first one, Marcus began to smile for the first time since waking up on this ship. The aliens thought they were testing him in their arena. What they were actually doing was training him to destroy them. He lay down on the bed and closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to begin planning the most important mission of his life. He was going to save every human on this ship. He was going to find a way back to Earth, and he was going to make sure that the Cathara Empire learned why humans had a reputation across the galaxy that they were only just beginning to understand. Tomorrow, the arena would see its first real test. Not of human weakness, but of human determination. The aliens were about to learn why the most dangerous thing in any universe was a Navy SEAL with nothing left to lose. Marcus Cross was about to show them what the name Reaper really meant. Marcus woke before dawn, though on a spaceship there was no real dawn to speak of. His internal clock told him he had slept for exactly 6 hours, the same amount he had trained his body to need during his years as a SEAL. The cell they had given him was larger than the first one, with what passed for a bed, a small table, and even a window that showed the endless stars outside. But the most important thing was the small alcove that contained what the aliens considered training equipment. There were weights that adjusted themselves based on how much force you applied, weapons that looked like they came from a dozen different worlds, and something that might have been a computer terminal, though it used symbols instead of any language Marcus recognized. A slot in the wall provided what appeared to be food. It looked like gray paste, but it tasted surprisingly good, and made Marcus feel more energetic than any meal he had eaten in years. Either the aliens knew more about human nutrition than humans did, or this food was designed to keep gladiators in peak condition. Probably both. As he ate, Marcus studied the weapons available to him. Most of them were clearly designed for non-human hands. Too big, wrong grip angles, or simply too heavy for a human to use effectively, but there were a few that might work. A blade that hummed with energy and seemed sharp enough to cut through the metal walls. A projectile weapon that fired bursts of superheated plasma, and something that looked like a spear but extended and contracted at the touch of a button. Marcus picked up each weapon and tested its weight and balance. The blade felt good in his hands, similar to the combat knives he had trained with for years. The plasma weapon was trickier. It had no obvious trigger or safety mechanism, and he didn't want to accidentally blast a hole in his own cell while learning to use it. The spear was interesting. When contracted, it was only about 18 inches long and could be concealed easily. When extended, it became an 8-foot weapon with a point sharp enough to penetrate armor. It was perfectly balanced and felt like it had been designed for someone with his training. He was practicing forms with the blade when he heard footsteps in the corridor. These were heavier than the clicking sounds the Kithara made. Human footsteps. Marcus moved to the door and listened. "New meat in cell 7, said a voice with a southern accent. "Word is, he's military." "They're all military or cops or something tough," replied another voice, this one with what sounded like a British accent. "Doesn't matter. The arena kills them all eventually." "This one's different. Guards were talking about his scan results. They've never seen a human with his physical specs." Marcus pressed himself against the wall next to his door and waited. A few minutes later, the door slid open and 2 humans entered. Both were wearing the same gray jumpsuits, but theirs were modified with additional padding and what looked like pieces of alien armor attached to them. The first man was huge, probably 6'6", and built like a linebacker. His arms were covered in scars, and he moved with the careful precision of someone who had learned to fight for his life on a regular basis. The second man was smaller, but had the lean, dangerous look of someone who survived on speed and cunning, rather than brute strength. "You're the new guy," said the big man. "I'm Tank. This is Ghost. We're what passes for a welcoming committee around here." Marcus relaxed slightly, but kept his guard up. "Marcus Cross, how long have you two been fighting in the arena?" Ghost laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Tank's been here 3 years. I've been here 2. We're the longest surviving gladiators on this ship. Most humans don't last more than a few months." "What's the secret to staying alive?" Tank sat down heavily on Marcus's bed. "Don't fight fair, don't show mercy, and never ever trust the aliens to keep their promises. They say if you win enough fights, you get freedom. It's a lie. The only freedom is death, and even that takes a while to get here." Ghost moved to the window and looked out at the stars. "Tank and I have a deal. We watch each other's backs when we can. Share information about the creatures they make us fight. Pool our resources to stay alive as long as possible. You want in on that deal?" Marcus considered the offer. Having allies was always good, but he also had to think about his larger mission. If he was going to save the humans on this ship, he couldn't afford to get too attached to any individual person. On the other hand, these 2 had survived longer than anyone else. They might have information he needed. "What kind of creatures do they make you fight?" Marcus asked. Tank pulled up his shirt, revealing a scar that ran from his ribs to his hip. "This was from a razorfin. Think of a shark that can breathe air and has legs like a spider. The plasma burns on my arms are from fighting a void weaver. Imagine a snake made of liquid metal that can shoot energy blasts." "The worst ones are the intelligent species," Ghost added. "Other sentients that got captured from their home worlds and forced to fight just like us. Those are the hardest because you can see the same fear in their eyes that you feel in your own heart. But they'll kill you just the same if it means staying alive one more day." Marcus filed away that information. The arena wasn't just about humans fighting monsters. It was about forcing captured sentients from across the galaxy to kill each other for alien entertainment. That made it even worse, but it also gave him ideas about potential allies. "Tell me about the guards," Marcus said. "How many are there? What are their routines? What kind of weapons do they carry?" Tank and Ghost looked at each other with expressions Marcus recognized. They were trying to figure out if he was planning something stupid that would get them all killed. "Why do you want to know?" Ghost asked carefully. Marcus made a decision. These 2 had survived this long because they were smart and tough. If he was going to have any chance of succeeding, he needed people like that on his side. "Because I'm not planning to die in the arena," Marcus said. "I'm planning to take this ship and get every human on it back to Earth." The silence that followed was so complete that Marcus could hear the hum of the ship's engines through the walls. Tank stared at him like he had just claimed he could fly by flapping his arms. Ghost slowly turned away from the window with an expression that was equal parts disbelief and desperate hope. "You're insane," Tank said finally. "Do you have any idea how many aliens are on this ship? Do you know what kind of weapons they have? Do you understand that we're probably thousands of light years from Earth with no way to navigate home even if we could somehow steal this ship?" "Yes," Marcus said calmly. "I understand all of that. I also understand that the alternative is to sit here and wait to die while these monsters use us for entertainment. I've spent my entire career doing things that other people said were impossible. This is just one more impossible mission." Ghost sat down at the table and studied Marcus's face. "You're serious. You're actually serious about this. Dead serious. The question is whether you two want to spend your remaining time in the arena trying to stay alive a few more months, or if you want to help me figure out how to save everyone on this ship." Tank shook his head. "Even if we could somehow take the ship, we don't know anything about alien technology. We can't fly this thing. We can't navigate in space. We can't even read their language." "We don't need to do any of those things," Marcus replied. "We just need to get back to Earth. Once we're in Earth's solar system, every military on the planet will be waiting for us. The aliens made a mistake when they started taking humans. They gave our species a common enemy." Ghost leaned forward. "What's your background? What makes you think you can pull off something like this?" Marcus decided to tell them the truth. If they were going to trust him with their lives, they deserved to know who he really was. Navy SEAL, 15 years, mostly in special operations. I've led missions behind enemy lines in a dozen different countries. I've extracted hostages from terrorist compounds. I've infiltrated enemy bases that were supposed to be impregnable. The main difference here is that the enemies are aliens instead of humans." Tank's expression changed. "SEAL? Which team?" "6. "Jesus," Tank breathed. "I heard stories about SEAL Team 6. You guys are the ones who—" "We're the ones who get called when everyone else says a mission is impossible," Marcus finished. "And right now, this is my mission. The only question is whether I'm doing it alone or with help." Ghost stood up and began pacing the small cell. "Even if we wanted to help, and I'm not saying we do, how would we even start? The arena is watched by hundreds of guards. Our weapons are monitored and collected after every fight. We're locked in our cells between matches." Marcus smiled for the first time since meeting them. "That's the beauty of it. They're giving us access to weapons, training facilities, and combat experience. They're also going to put us in situations where we can observe their security protocols and study their technology. Most importantly, they think we're just entertainment. They're not expecting a military operation." Tank was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Finally, he spoke. "Let's say, just for argument's sake, that this crazy plan has a 1% chance of working. How do we start?" "Information gathering," Marcus replied. "I need to know everything about this ship, how many humans are on board and where they're kept, how many aliens and what their command structure looks like, what kind of defenses the ship has, how the arena is organized and what kind of creatures they have us fight. Every detail, no matter how small." Ghost stopped pacing. "And then what?" "Then we identify key targets and figure out how to take them out. Command and control centers, weapon systems, communication arrays, engine rooms. We make a list of what needs to be destroyed or captured, and we figure out how to do it." "You're talking about a military assault on an alien warship," Tank said. "With 3 people. 3 people to start with," Marcus corrected. "But there are thousands of humans on this ship. Most of them have given up hope, but some of them remember how to fight. We find the fighters, and we give them a reason to hope again. We turn the gladiators into soldiers." The 3 men sat in silence, each thinking about what Marcus had proposed. It was insane, impossible, and would probably get them all killed. But it was also the first plan any of them had heard that didn't involve just waiting to die. "I need to know more about you," Ghost said finally. If we're going to trust you with our lives, we need to know you can do what you say you can do. What operations have you been on? Marcus understood the question. These men needed to know he wasn't just making empty promises. Somalia, 2019. My team extracted a kidnapped aid worker from a compound with 30 armed guards. We got in and out without firing a shot. Afghanistan, 2020. We infiltrated a Taliban stronghold to rescue a captured pilot. The compound was in a valley surrounded by 300 enemy fighters. We brought the pilot home. Syria, 2021. We eliminated a terrorist cell that was planning attacks on American soil. The mission was classified as impossible by every other special operations unit that looked at it. Tank whistled softly. How did you get captured by these aliens? Wrong place, wrong time. My team was doing surveillance in Afghanistan when their ship showed up. We had no warning, no preparation, and no idea what we were dealing with. But now I know what they're capable of, and I know they're not invincible. Ghost moved to the weapons alcove and picked up the energy blade. What makes you think we can beat creatures with technology that's probably centuries ahead of ours? Because advanced technology doesn't make you smart, and it doesn't make you brave, Marcus replied. These aliens have been capturing primitive species for so long that they've gotten comfortable. They don't expect real resistance. They certainly don't expect a coordinated military operation. Tank stood up and extended his hand. You're completely insane. This plan will probably get us all killed. I'm in. Ghost grinned and shook Marcus's hand as well. Better to die fighting than to die in the arena for their entertainment. Count me in too. Marcus felt a familiar sensation, the same feeling he had gotten before every major operation in his SEAL career. Fear mixed with excitement, uncertainty balanced by determination. He was about to attempt the most impossible mission of his life, but for the first time since waking up on this ship, he had hope. Tomorrow I fight my first match in the arena, Marcus said. I need you both to watch everything. How the guards move, where they position themselves, what kind of weapons they carry, how the creatures are transported and controlled, what the command structure looks like. Everything. What are you going to do? Ghost asked. Marcus picked up the energy blade and tested its balance again. I'm going to win, and I'm going to make sure everyone in that arena remembers exactly what happens when you mess with a human soldier. As his new allies left his cell, Marcus began the mental preparation routine he had used before every mission. He visualized the arena, imagined different types of opponents, and planned strategies for each scenario. But most importantly, he began to think like a SEAL again instead of a prisoner. The aliens thought they had captured a human to fight in their arena. What they had actually done was give a Navy SEAL access to weapons, training, and intelligence gathering opportunities. Tomorrow, they were going to learn the difference. The morning of Marcus's first arena fight arrived with the sound of footsteps in the corridor outside his cell. But these weren't the clicking claws of the Cathara guards. These were the heavy boots of someone who moved with military precision. Marcus was already awake, having spent the last hour running through combat scenarios in his mind. When the door opened, he was surprised to see a human in modified alien armor. The man was probably in his 50s, with gray hair and scars that spoke of a lifetime of fighting. But what caught Marcus's attention were his eyes. Unlike every other human Marcus had met on this ship, this man's eyes weren't defeated. They were sharp, calculating, and very much alive. "Cross," the man said in a voice that carried the unmistakable authority of someone used to command. "I'm Sergeant Major Peterson. I run training for the gladiators. You have 1 hour to prepare for your first fight." Marcus stood and studied Peterson carefully. This was clearly someone who had found a way to not just survive, but to maintain some level of authority, even in captivity. "How long have you been here, Sergeant Major?" 5 years, Peterson replied. "Long enough to understand how this system works. Long enough to know that the only thing keeping any of us alive is our ability to entertain our captors. You want to live longer than a week? You listen to what I tell you." They walked through corridors that Marcus hadn't seen before, heading toward what he assumed was the arena. Along the way, Peterson explained the rules that governed gladiatorial combat on the ship. First rule, always put on a show. The aliens don't just want you to win or lose, they want drama. They want to see fear, courage, anger, desperation. The more emotion you show, the longer you survive, win or lose. Second rule, learn to read your opponent quickly. They'll throw creatures at you from dozens of different worlds. Some are pure predators, some are intelligent, some are desperate prisoners just like you. Your strategy has to change based on what you're facing. Third rule, never show the guards or the command staff that you're smarter than they think you are. They see humans as barely intelligent animals. The moment they realize you're capable of planning or leadership, you become a threat instead of entertainment. That last rule was particularly interesting to Marcus. Peterson was telling him to hide his intelligence, which meant Peterson had been hiding his own intelligence for 5 years. This was someone who might be thinking along the same lines Marcus was. They entered a preparation area that looked like a cross between a military armory and a gladiator's dressing room from ancient Rome. Weapons of every conceivable type hung from the walls. Some looked like they came from medieval Earth, others were clearly alien technology, and a few appeared to be jury-rigged combinations of both. "Choose your weapons based on your first opponent," Peterson said, pointing to a screen that showed information about Marcus's upcoming fight. "Today you're facing a thornback. Think of an armored rhinoceros crossed with a porcupine, but 3 times larger and smart enough to use tools." The image on the screen showed a creature that made the monsters from Marcus's worst nightmares look friendly. It was easily 12 feet tall and 20 feet long, with hide that looked like overlapping metal plates. Its back was covered with spines that appeared to be sharp enough to pierce tank armor. Its head was massive, with tusks that could probably punch through a concrete wall. "Weapons recommendation?" Marcus asked. Peterson handed him a spear similar to the one Marcus had practiced with in his cell, but this one was larger and had additional features. "Extended reach is your friend against a thornback. This spear has a power core that can deliver an electrical discharge through the point. One good hit to the nervous system and you can slow it down." Marcus tested the weight and balance of the spear. It felt good in his hands, familiar. "What's its weak spot?" "The joints between its armor plates. But you have to be fast and precise." "Thornbacks are smarter than they look. This one has killed 6 gladiators in the last 2 months." As Peterson helped him strap on protective armor, Marcus asked the question that had been on his mind since meeting Tank and Ghost. "How many humans survive more than a year in the arena?" Peterson paused in his work. "Out of the hundreds who have fought here since I arrived, maybe a dozen. And most of those are dead now, too. But you're still alive. Tank and Ghost are still alive. There are others. 4 of us left who have survived more than 2 years, Peterson confirmed. We've learned to be valuable to the aliens in different ways. I train new gladiators, which means they invest resources in keeping me alive. Tank and Ghost have become crowd favorites. The aliens bet on their fights and make money when they win. The 4th is a woman named Sarah Chen. She's a doctor, captured from a hospital in California. They use her to keep valuable gladiators alive between fights." Marcus filed that information away. 4 long-term survivors who had found ways to be valuable beyond just fighting. That suggested they were intelligent and adaptable, exactly the kind of people he would need for his plan. "Tell me about the command structure," Marcus said as they walked toward the arena entrance. "Who makes the decisions about the fights?" "Commander Vextar runs the arena operations. Under him are about 20 officers who handle different aspects: selecting opponents, managing betting, maintaining the creatures, medical support for valuable gladiators. Below them are maybe 200 guards who handle security and crowd control." "What about the ship's command structure?" Peterson gave Marcus a sharp look. "That's an interesting question for someone about to fight his first arena match. Most gladiators are only worried about staying alive for the next few minutes. Marcus realized he had revealed too much of his thinking. He needed to be more careful. Just trying to understand the bigger picture helps me stay focused. They reached the entrance to the arena, and Marcus could hear the sounds of thousands of aliens in the stands. Their voices created a rumbling noise that seemed to vibrate through the floor and walls. Peterson stopped and put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Whatever you're really thinking about, Cross, be careful. I've seen too many good soldiers get themselves killed by being heroes. In here, the only thing that matters is surviving until tomorrow." Marcus nodded, but privately he disagreed. Surviving until tomorrow was just the first step. His real goal was making sure that tomorrow looked very different from today. The entrance to the arena floor was a massive gate that opened with the grinding sound of heavy machinery. As Marcus walked through it, the roar of the alien crowd hit him like a physical force. The arena was even larger than he had thought when he first saw it. The stands rose up in tiers that seemed to go on forever, filled with thousands of Cathara and other alien species he didn't recognize. The arena floor itself was about the size of a football field, with a sand surface that was stained dark with blood from previous fights. Around the edges were what looked like holding pens and equipment storage areas. Above everything, protected by energy shields, were luxury boxes where the most important aliens watched the fights. Marcus walked to the center of the arena and raised his spear in salute to the crowd, the way Peterson had instructed him. The response was immediate, a thunderous roar that seemed to shake the entire ship. These aliens loved their blood sports. On the opposite side of the arena, another gate was opening. The thornback that emerged was even more terrifying in person than it had been on the screen. Its armor plates gleamed under the arena lights, and the spines on its back seemed to move independently, tracking potential threats. When it saw Marcus, it let out a roar that sounded like a freight train crashing into a building. Marcus had faced dangerous opponents before, but never anything like this. Every instinct in his body was telling him to run, to find cover, to get as far away from this creature as possible. But he was a Navy SEAL, and SEALs didn't run from anything. The thornback charged with surprising speed for something so large. Marcus rolled to the side and thrust his spear toward one of the joints in the creature's armor. The electrical discharge from the spear's power core lit up the joint with blue energy, and the thornback stumbled slightly, but it wasn't enough to stop the creature. It turned toward him with movements that were faster and more coordinated than something that big had any right to be. One of its tusks missed Marcus's head by inches as he dove in the opposite direction. The crowd's roar grew even louder, feeding on the drama of the near miss. Marcus circled the creature, looking for opportunities to strike at weak points. But the thornback wasn't just a mindless beast. It was learning his movement patterns, adjusting its attacks, trying to corner him against the arena walls. This was a predator that had survived on its home world by being smarter than its prey. The third charge was different. Instead of just running straight at Marcus, the thornback angled its body so that its spines were positioned to prevent him from dodging to either side. Marcus had a split second to make a decision. He could try to jump over the creature, which would probably result in being impaled on its spines. He could try to go under it, which would probably result in being crushed. Or he could do something the creature wasn't expecting. Marcus ran straight at the thornback's head. The creature was so surprised by this apparent suicide charge that it hesitated for just a moment. That moment was all Marcus needed. He planted the butt of his spear in the sand and used it as a pole vault to launch himself over the creature's head, spinning as he went. As he passed over the thornback's skull, he drove the point of his spear into the small gap between the creature's head armor and neck armor. The electrical discharge at point-blank range sent the thornback into convulsions. Marcus landed hard on his shoulder and rolled, coming up with his spear ready for another attack. But the creature was down, its nervous system overloaded by the electrical shock. It wasn't dead, but it wasn't getting up anytime soon. The crowd's reaction was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. The roar was so loud that he could feel it in his bones. The aliens were on their feet, waving appendages and making sounds that were probably cheers. In the luxury boxes, he could see important-looking aliens pointing at him and making animated gestures. Marcus raised his spear again in salute, playing the part of a gladiator who had just won his first victory. But his mind was already analyzing everything he had observed. The arena's security systems, the positioning of guards, the layout of the creature-holding areas, the access points to different sections of the ship. As he walked toward the exit, Peterson was waiting for him with an expression that mixed admiration with concern. "That was either brilliant or insane," Peterson said as they walked back through the corridors. "What's the difference?" Marcus replied. "Brilliant keeps you alive. Insane gets you promoted to harder opponents." They were back in the preparation area when Commander Vextar appeared with several other high-ranking Cathara officers. The aliens' dark scales were almost shimmering with what Marcus interpreted as excitement. "Impressive performance," Vextar said in his grinding metal voice. "Very entertaining. The crowd enjoyed your creativity." "Thank you, Commander," Marcus replied, keeping his voice neutral and respectful. "Your next fight will be in 3 days. We have something special planned for you, something that will test your abilities in new ways." After the aliens left, Peterson pulled Marcus aside. "You've got their attention now. That's good and bad. Good because they'll invest more resources in keeping you alive. Bad because they'll start putting you against opponents specifically chosen to challenge your particular skills." Marcus nodded, but privately he was pleased. Getting the attention of the command staff was exactly what he needed. The more they focused on him as an individual gladiator, the less they would think of him as a potential threat to their operation. That evening, Tank and Ghost visited his cell to debrief the fight. They had watched from the gladiator section of the stands and had observed everything Marcus had asked them to. 20 guards positioned around the arena floor, Tank reported. Standard positions, but they rotate every 15 minutes. The creatures are brought up from lower levels through automated transport systems. The command staff watches from shielded boxes that look like they have their own life support systems. "What about the other aliens in the crowd?" Marcus asked. Ghost pulled out a piece of cloth with markings on it, a crude map he had sketched from memory. "Different species, different sections. The Cathara get the best seats, obviously, but there are at least 6 other species represented, some kind of insectoid race, something that looks like walking trees, and a few that I couldn't even begin to describe." "That's important," Marcus said. "This isn't just a Cathara operation. It's some kind of galactic empire with multiple species involved. That could mean allies, but it also means the scope of what we're dealing with is bigger than just this ship." Tank leaned back against the wall. "Speaking of bigger scope, Peterson came to see us after your fight. He wanted to know if we had talked to you about anything other than arena survival." Marcus felt a chill. Had Peterson suspected something about their plans? "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That we talked about staying alive and sharing information about opponents. But Cross, I think Peterson is thinking along the same lines you are. Some of the questions he asked, the way he looked when he asked them, I think he's been planning something for a while." That was very interesting. If Peterson had been thinking about resistance or escape for 5 years, he might have information and resources that Marcus needed. But it also meant being very careful about how to approach him. A man who had survived this long was either very smart or very lucky, and Marcus needed to figure out which. "Tomorrow I start training for the next fight," Marcus said. "I need you both to continue gathering intelligence. Focus on the ship's layout, guard routines, and anything you can learn about the other human prisoners, particularly anyone with military, police, or technical backgrounds." Ghost stood up to leave, then paused. "Cross, that move you pulled today, Pole vaulting over the Thornback's head? Where did you learn something like that? Marcus smiled. SEAL training. We practice fighting in unconventional ways against superior opponents, but that was just the warm-up. Wait until you see what I do when I really need to impress someone. As his allies left, Marcus began planning his next move. He had proven he could win in the arena, which gave him credibility with both the aliens and the other gladiators. He had identified potential allies in Peterson, Tank, Ghost, and possibly Dr. Chen. He had gathered initial intelligence about the ship's security and command structure. Most importantly, he had confirmed that the aliens saw him as entertainment rather than a threat. That gave him the most valuable thing any special operations soldier could have, the element of surprise. In 3 days, he would face whatever opponent the aliens had chosen to test his skills. But Marcus wasn't worried about that fight. He was already planning the fight that really mattered, the one that would determine whether thousands of humans spent the rest of their lives as slaves or went home as free people. The aliens thought they had found their newest gladiator. What they had actually found was their worst nightmare, a Navy SEAL with a mission. Marcus's second arena fight came sooner than expected. Instead of 3 days, Commander Vexitar summoned him after only 2 days of training. When Peterson delivered the news, his expression was grim. "They're accelerating your schedule," Peterson said as they walked toward the preparation area. "That usually means they have something specific in mind, something they want to test." "What kind of opponent am I facing?" Peterson stopped walking and looked directly at Marcus. "That's the problem. They won't tell me. First time in 5 years that they've refused to give me advance intelligence on an opponent. Either they want to see how you handle the unknown or what? Or they suspect you're more than just a lucky gladiator." Marcus felt his pulse quicken, but kept his expression neutral. "Any theories about what I might be facing?" "3 possibilities," Peterson said as they resumed walking. "First, they could be testing your adaptability by throwing you against something completely unpredictable. Second, they could be putting you against another human to see if you'll kill your own species for their entertainment. Third," Peterson paused again, and Marcus could see the concern in his eyes. "Third, they could be putting you against something they know will kill you because they've decided you're too dangerous to keep alive." They reached the armory, but instead of the usual array of weapons, Marcus found only a single table with a small selection of basic arms: a short sword, a knife, a shield, and what looked like a net. No advanced alien weapons, no electrical spears. Nothing that had given him an advantage in his first fight. "They're limiting your equipment," Peterson observed. "Definitely not a good sign." Marcus picked up the sword and tested its balance. It was well made, but completely ordinary. No power cores, no special features, just steel and a sharp edge. The kind of weapon that required skill and training to use effectively, rather than technological advantages. "Maybe they want to see what I can do with basic equipment," Marcus suggested. "Or maybe they want to make sure you can't do too much," Peterson countered. As they headed toward the arena entrance, Peterson grabbed Marcus's arm. "Cross, I've been watching gladiators for 5 years. I've seen hundreds of fighters face their first few battles. You're different. You move like someone with extensive combat training. You think tactically instead of just reacting. You ask questions about things that have nothing to do with immediate survival." Marcus met Peterson's gaze steadily. "What are you saying, Sergeant Major?" "I'm saying that if you're planning something beyond just staying alive in the arena, now might be the time to trust someone who's been thinking along the same lines for a lot longer than you have." They were at the arena entrance now, and Marcus could hear the crowd gathering in the stands. He had to make a decision: trust Peterson with the truth or continue to play the role of just another gladiator. "After the fight," Marcus said quietly, "if I survive whatever they're throwing at me, we'll talk. Really talk." Peterson nodded. "Try to stay alive, Cross. I have a feeling we're going to need each other." The arena entrance opened, and Marcus walked into the familiar roar of the alien crowd. But something was different this time. The atmosphere felt more charged, more expectant. In the luxury boxes, he could see more high-ranking aliens than had been present for his first fight. Some of them looked like they belonged to species other than the Cathara. Marcus walked to the center of the arena and raised his sword in salute. The crowd's response was enthusiastic, but he noticed that some sections seemed more subdued than others. Alien politics at work, perhaps. Different species with different interests in the outcome of this fight. The opposite gate opened, and Marcus understood immediately why the aliens had been secretive about his opponent. Walking into the arena was another human. She was probably in her 30s, with the lean build of someone who had been fighting for survival for a long time. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she moved with the controlled grace of a trained fighter. She carried the same basic weapons Marcus had been given: sword, knife, shield, and net. But it was her eyes that told Marcus everything he needed to know. They held the same alertness he had seen in Peterson's eyes, the same intelligence he recognized in himself. This wasn't just another broken prisoner forced to fight for alien entertainment. This was a soldier. The woman reached the center of the arena and stopped about 20 feet away from Marcus. She raised her sword in salute, but as she did, she caught his eye and made a barely perceptible gesture with her free hand. Marcus recognized it immediately, a tactical signal used by military forces around the world. She was telling him she was friendly. The crowd's roar reached a crescendo as the fight was officially announced. Marcus could hear the alien announcer's grinding voice, but he was focused entirely on the woman across from him. She was making more subtle gestures, and Marcus realized she was trying to communicate with him using hand signals. Her message was clear. Play along. Fight hard, but avoid killing blows. They want a show. Marcus responded with his own signals. Understood. American military. You? Her reply made him smile grimly. British SAS. Been here 2 years. The fight began with the sound of a massive gong, and both fighters immediately launched into action. But what followed wasn't the desperate battle for survival that the alien audience expected. It was a carefully choreographed dance between two professionals who understood exactly what they were doing. The woman, Marcus decided to think of her as SAS until he learned her real name, attacked with a series of sword strikes that looked vicious but were precisely calculated to miss by inches. Marcus responded with equally impressive defensive moves and counterattacks that came close enough to draw gasps from the crowd, but never actually connected. They fought across the entire arena floor, using every inch of space to create a dramatic spectacle. Marcus threw his net, and SAS rolled under it with perfect timing. She feinted with her knife, and Marcus deflected it with his shield, the impact echoing through the arena. To the alien audience, it looked like a desperate battle between two skilled fighters. In reality, it was two professionals putting on the performance of their lives. But Marcus also used the fight to gather intelligence. As they moved around the arena, he studied the guard positions, the access points, the camera angles, and the reaction of the command staff in their luxury boxes. He noticed that some of the high-ranking aliens were making gestures that looked like they were placing bets on the outcome. After 15 minutes of spectacular but non-lethal combat, Marcus made a decision. He allowed SAS to get inside his guard and wound him with her knife, a shallow cut on his sword arm that bled impressively but wasn't dangerous. Then he stumbled backward and fell to the sand, dropping his sword. SAS stood over him with her blade at his throat, breathing hard from the exertion of their performance. The crowd was on its feet, screaming for her to finish him. In the luxury boxes, aliens were making excited gestures as bets were settled. But SAS didn't deliver the killing blow. Instead, she looked up at the command box where Commander Vexitar was sitting and made a gesture that Marcus interpreted as asking for mercy. The crowd's reaction was immediate and divided. Some sections screamed for blood, others seemed to appreciate the drama of the moment. Commander Vextar stood up and raised one of his 4 arms. The arena fell silent. "The victor shows mercy," Vextar announced in his grinding voice. "Both gladiators have shown skill and courage. Both will live to fight another day." The crowd exploded in cheers and alien sounds that might have been approval. Marcus and SAS helped each other to their feet and raised their weapons together in salute. It had been a perfect performance, dramatic, skillful, and memorable without either fighter having to die for the aliens' entertainment. As they walked toward the exit together, SAS spoke quietly, without moving her lips. "Captain Sarah Mitchell, 22nd SAS Regiment. Your American Special Forces. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Cross, Navy SEAL Team 6. How long have you been planning your exit strategy? 2 years? You? 5 days?" Sarah almost missed a step. 5 days? You've been here 5 days and you're already planning escape? Not escape, Marcus corrected. Liberation. Every human on this ship. They were separated at the exit, with guards taking each of them to different areas for medical treatment and debriefing. But Marcus had learned everything he needed to know. There was at least one other professional soldier among the gladiators, someone with 2 years of experience on this ship and her own plans for resistance. Dr. Sarah Chen, the captured physician Peterson had mentioned, was waiting to treat Marcus's knife wound. She was a small woman, probably in her 40s, with steady hands and intelligent eyes that reminded Marcus of his own team's medic. "Interesting fight," Dr. Chen said as she cleaned and bandaged his arm. "Most gladiators try to kill each other as quickly as possible. You two seemed more interested in putting on a show." Marcus studied her carefully. "Maybe we both understood that entertainment value keeps you alive longer than quick kills." "Maybe," Dr. Chen agreed. "Or maybe you both recognized each other as professionals who know how to work together instead of just fighting." She finished the bandage and looked directly at Marcus. "Captain Mitchell asked me to give you something." Dr. Chen handed him what looked like a small piece of medical tape, but when Marcus examined it closely, he could see tiny marks that had been scratched into the surface. Coordinates, he realized. Sarah was telling him where to meet her. "When?" Marcus asked. "The cleaning detail rotation changes at 300 ship time. Guards are minimal in the maintenance areas between 300 and 400. Marcus memorized the coordinates and the time, then let the tape dissolve in his mouth. It tasted like nothing but left no residue. Dr. Chen had obviously been planning clandestine communications for a while. "Doctor," Marcus said as he prepared to leave, "hypothetically, if someone were planning a large-scale operation against the aliens running this ship, what kind of medical support would be needed?" Dr. Chen's expression didn't change, but Marcus saw her pupils dilate slightly. Hypothetically, such an operation would need someone who understood alien physiology well enough to know their vulnerable points. Someone who had studied their technology enough to know how their medical systems work. Someone who had been treating both human and alien injuries for 2 years and had learned things that might be useful. Hypothetically, would such a person be interested in participating in such an operation? Hypothetically, Dr. Chen said with the ghost of a smile, such a person has been waiting for someone to ask that question for a very long time. Marcus returned to his cell with his mind racing. In 2 days, he had identified 3 potential allies with critical skills. Peterson, a sergeant major with 5 years of intelligence gathering, Sarah, an SAS captain with extensive special operations experience, and Dr. Chen, a physician with detailed knowledge of alien biology and technology. Tank and Ghost were waiting for him when he arrived, eager to hear about the fight and what he had learned. "British SAS," Marcus told them. 2 years' experience on this ship, and she's been planning resistance operations. "We're meeting tonight to coordinate." Ghost whistled softly. "How many of us are there? Professional military, I mean." "More than I expected," Marcus replied. The aliens seem to specifically target military personnel, police officers, and other people with combat training. They want skilled fighters for the arena, but they don't realize they're collecting exactly the people most likely to organize resistance. Tank sat down heavily on the bed. So what's the plan? How do we turn a handful of soldiers into an army? Marcus began laying out the strategy that had been forming in his mind since his first day on the ship. Phase 1. Identify and recruit all the humans on this ship with military, police, or technical backgrounds. Build a network of cells that can operate independently but coordinate when necessary. Phase 2. Gather detailed intelligence on the ship's systems, security protocols, and command structure. Map out critical targets and identify vulnerabilities. Phase 3. Acquire weapons and equipment. The arena gives us access to alien technology, and Dr. Chen has access to medical supplies that could be modified for other purposes. Phase 4. Create diversions and incidents that will test alien response times and reveal their emergency procedures. Make them think they're dealing with random problems instead of coordinated resistance. Phase 5. Execute simultaneous strikes against command and control, communications, weapon systems, and engine control. Take the ship intact so we can navigate back to Earth. Ghost stared at him. You've planned this entire operation in 5 days? I've planned operations like this my entire career, Marcus replied. The only difference is the enemy is aliens instead of humans. The principles of special operations don't change just because you're in space. Tank shook his head in amazement. How many people do you think we'll need to pull this off? 50 to 100 depending on their skills and the ship's actual defenses, but we start with the people we know we can trust, and we build from there. At Oro 300 ship time, Marcus made his way through corridors he had memorized during his trips to and from the arena. The coordinates Sarah had given him led to a maintenance area deep in the ship's lower levels, where the constant hum of machinery would mask any conversation. Sarah was waiting for him, along with Peterson and Dr. Bacon Chen. All three of them looked like people who had been planning for this moment for a long time. Captain Mitchell has briefed us on your proposal, Peterson said without preamble. We want to hear the details. For the next hour, Marcus laid out his plan in full detail. He explained the phases, the timeline, the resource requirements, and the risks. The others listened without interruption, asking questions only when they needed clarification. When he finished, Sarah was the first to respond. It's ambitious. Some might say impossible. But the basic strategy is sound. I've been working on something similar, but my plan was focused on escape rather than liberation. Escape just means they come after us, Marcus replied. Liberation means they can't. Peterson leaned forward. What makes you think we can succeed where everyone else has failed? The Cathara have been doing this for centuries. They've dealt with resistance before. Because they've never dealt with human military professionals working together as a coordinated unit. Marcus answered. They capture individuals or small groups. They break them down psychologically and use them as slave labor or entertainment. They've never faced a properly planned and executed special operations mission. Dr. Chen spoke up for the first time. I can provide intelligence on alien physiology and technology. I've also been collecting medical supplies and equipment that could be repurposed for other uses. But Marcus, you need to understand the scope of what you're proposing. This isn't just one ship. The Cathara Empire spans dozens of star systems. Even if we succeed here, there will be consequences. Then we make sure Earth is ready for those consequences, Marcus replied. We get home, we brief our military leaders, and we prepare for whatever comes next. But first we save the people on this ship. Sarah nodded slowly. All right, I'm in. But I want to know everyone who's involved, and I want detailed operational security protocols. If this goes wrong, it's not just us who die. It's every human on this ship. Agreed, Marcus said. Peterson, what's your assessment of human resources on this ship? Peterson pulled out a piece of cloth with markings similar to the map Ghost had made. I've been cataloging humans for 5 years. Total population is approximately 3,000. Of those, maybe 200 have military or police backgrounds. Another 300 have technical skills that could be useful. Engineers, doctors, scientists, skilled tradespeople. The rest are civilians with no relevant training. That's more than enough for our core team, Marcus said. We focus on recruiting the 200 with military backgrounds first. They become cell leaders who can recruit and train the technical specialists. The civilians we protect and evacuate once we've secured the ship. Dr. Chen stood up to leave. This will take time to organize properly. Weeks, maybe months. Are you prepared for a long-term operation? Marcus smiled grimly. Doctor, I've been training for this mission my entire life. I just didn't know it would be in space. As they prepared to return to their cells, Sarah caught Marcus's arm. Cross, there's something else you need to know. The reason they're accelerating your arena schedule, the reason they had us fight each other today, they're planning something big. New arrivals, expansion of operations, something that has the command staff excited. What kind of new arrivals? Unknown. But I overheard guards talking about fresh hunting grounds and new species to test. Whatever they're planning, it's going to involve capturing more people from more worlds. Marcus felt cold anger settle in his stomach. The aliens weren't just keeping humans as slaves and entertainment. They were expanding their operations, planning to do to other species what they had done to humanity. Then we don't have months to plan, Marcus said. We have weeks, maybe less. As he made his way back to his cell, Marcus revised his timeline. Phase 1 needed to start immediately. By tomorrow night, he wanted to have made contact with at least 10 humans with military backgrounds. By the end of the week, he wanted operational cells in place throughout the ship. The aliens thought they had captured a Navy SEAL to fight in their arena for entertainment. What they had actually done was give a special operations soldier access to weapons, training facilities, intelligence gathering opportunities, and a motivated team of military professionals. In 2 weeks, Commander Vexitar and his crew were going to learn why the most dangerous words in any language were, "I am a United States Navy SEAL, and I am not going down without a fight." The liberation of every human on this ship was about to begin, and Marcus Cross was going to make sure the aliens remembered the name Reaper for the rest of their very short lives.